Good evening everyone, I hope you can hear me. A bit windy. So I want to start the video here because I'm feeling good. So start the video on a positive note. The wind literally only just started. Just looking at the stones on the roof of my van, having dinner, watching the sunset go down over there. It might actually be quite nice. And yeah, it's been quite miserable. Yesterday was drizzly and really windy, but it's a few top tips for converting a Luton, because I understand that although I have done some conversion videos on the van, they were very brief and I didn't film what I was doing or really explain it very well, and the title wasn't named after that, so I want to put some how-to kind of top tip kind of videos out there for you Luton converters. I hope this episode is going to help some people. So yeah, I'll leave you guys with a sunset time lapse tonight, and then I'll catch you guys tomorrow where I'll explain a few of the tips. Good morning everyone, it's now the next day, and I've got some tips for you. I've got 5 top tips for building a Luton. Most of them are weight saving, and one of them is just consider it because it's a good idea. It's about weight distribution, so they are technically all weight tips. So the first one I would like to say, which I haven't done because money and time, but if you're really worried about weight, I've heard that some Lutons weigh like over 2.5 ton empty. So if you've got one of them and you're really worried about it, like an Iveco, because they're quite heavy ones, a top tip would be to replace. I've seen some people get a roll of aluminium. Like, I don't know the thicknesses, so I can't recommend, but it's just an idea you can look into. Is a roll of aluminium to replace the fiberglass roof. Now I couldn't have done that because my fiberglass rivets onto the walls. It's like a formed piece of fiberglass, which is very unique, so it's not prone to leaking like a lot of them where they've got the coving and it joins the fiberglass warps over time and you get leaks. So I haven't got that issue, so that's one thing, that's another reason. But you can also replace the 12mm heavy rotten old ply floor with a nice 2 or 3mm thick piece of alley sheets going down, or a roll if you can find it. So that's another option. That will save you probably like 100 kilos. It will get you down, I reckon, by doing them both. But that's if you've got the money and you've got the time and you can afford it, and you know you're dedicating everything to it. Which I'm dedicating everything to it, but I just can't dedicate loads of money towards it because that's expensive. So that's tip number 1, and I would recommend you do that if you can, because it's just a good idea. An aluminium floor and ceiling are just going to last longer than the van itself that's made of steel, you know, so it's a good investment if you can afford it. Tip number 2 is something I've done and I would strongly recommend. I was told about it by a friend who was converting a horse box, and anyone who's converting a Luton, I would recommend you at least consider doing some bit of this in your build, and that being a subfloor. Now I have a 30cm deep subfloor. I raised it using CLS. If I can find some pictures, I will overlay them. And put one centre support in here, and then 2 edge ones, and then I joined them all together. So I made basically like a U shape with a centre support, and then joined them all together with CLS again, just at the ends, not in the middle. And I've insulated the floor with a subfloor. If you're just going to stay in the UK, you could probably get away without insulating the floor because you've got such a distance, but you risk things freezing. I've insulated it and added a heating circuit because I plan to go to the Arctic in this van one day, so it needs to be able to cope with -20 and not everything down here freeze. But yeah, insulate or not the floor, but you can then raise it. I've got 50mm insulation down there on 60mm CLS because CLS is cheap. And if I had a table saw, I'd rip it down. And then for the subfloor floor, I've just got sheets of 6mm ply cut out and stuck into each section, and they're not even screwed in or anything, they're just laying there and they just fit in between the battens and they're not moving, and they're only 6mm because they're only supporting, you know, the stuff down there, you're not walking on it. And that leads nicely onto my next point, which is use as thinner material as you can where possible. So I do have 20mm thick solid wood floorboards. I am not the best demonstration, but if you think, oh, I'm going to have to really overframe this, like some people build their sofas and kitchens sturdy as anything, which is great, but it adds a lot of weight and you don't need it. All you really need for a kitchen frame is just a square for the front, a square for the back, and whatever lines you need for drawers and cupboards and stuff. And then just 4 corner pieces is all I've got, one in each 4 corner, joining the front frame to the back frame. And the back frame can literally just be a square, it doesn't need anything fancy. So that's what I've done, built it super lightweight. If I can find some old footage of how they looked when I put them in, they weigh nothing, and I use 18mm by 44mm battens, and that way you don't need the depth on the battens, and they're really lightweight compared to using the square 34 by 34, which when you add all that up, that gets quite weighty. And then while we're talking about kitchens, this leads nicely on to my next point, which is most people in vans, and you know, it makes sense to do it, is to insulate everything, line everything, and then start framing out your stuff. Don't. Because there's unnecessary weight there, and you don't need that. Now what I've done is, as you can see, I still have no walls here. I do have the start of a wall here now, coming together, but I framed my sofa, my stairs down here, to get up to the bed. I framed everything out first, well, apart from the fact that I put this bulkhead wall on, but I framed everything out first, so behind the kitchen is just insulation. You could put a 3mm back on there if you need to screw things to it, but if you don't, and it's just the back of a cupboard, it doesn't really matter. And I've got drawers in a lot of places, and obviously behind the drawers, behind the fridge, behind the oven, you don't need anything, it can just stay insulation. That's adding extra weight. And then what you do once you've framed everything and got your kitchen worktops in, and you know, your sofa's built and you know where everything's going, then you can start putting walls up. Now if you're using plywood, might be a bit of a pain in the arse to scribe round everything, but if you're using tongue and groove or pallet wood in my case, you can, that's why I like using those two things, is because you can do it piece by piece and you can match each piece to the shape of whatever you're doing, rather than a whole sheet of ply which you've got to try and get it all right in one thing. Which leads nicely onto my next point. This is accidental. If you're going to use pallet wood on the walls rather than 8mm tongue and groove, it can obviously be very weighty, and I probably wouldn't recommend it. Now if you have access to a planer thicknesser, whack them through there. Plane them down to like 10mm, you'll be good. But I don't, so I haven't actually done it yet, but I'm going to be doing it on this wall, is route out the back. So you take most of the material out of the pallet wood and then just screw the nice bit left, and then it's hollow behind essentially, which obviously takes out a lot of the weight. So if you've got any thick materials that you really want to install, use a router on the back of it and route the back face out, and yeah, you'll be good to go then. It will take a lot of the weight out. And the last kind of added point I just want to add is don't put tiles in your van if you're 3.5 ton. You see I've left this gap here. It's nice, it's under the window frame, and the pallet wood stops here as well. The reason for that is this is going to be a sheet of 6mm ply. It's going to go along the back of the kitchen worktop, and I'm going to use those stick-on tiles, and I've had good experience with them in my mum's van. They've been on there for like 4 years. We've been to Portugal, it's been in 30-degree heats in the summer, in 40-degree heats in Spain and stuff, and they're solid. Apart from where there was a join in the ply, and it's moved a bit, it started to pry away, but as long as you're on a solid flat sheet and it's all good, and even if you maybe varnish it, it'll get a better adhesion. Yeah, they're great, those stick-on tiles, and obviously super lightweight. That's just a quick, nice video I wanted to put together. As I said yesterday, a lot of my videos have just kind of been in with a weekly video, so if you're a Luton van builder, it's not really in the search term. So I'm going to make this video especially for helping out 3.5 ton Luton van converters that are really struggling for weight. So if you're thinking about doing it, please consider some of these tips. The idea of the subfloor, might I add, that I didn't really say, is that it keeps the weight down low. You don't need overhead cupboards, it keeps the weight down low, and it keeps the centre of gravity low, which is better when you're driving, when you're going around corners, if you're going along potholy roads like I'm currently on Stonehenge, and even now the box sways if you drive down it. So yeah, centre of gravity low, and you don't need all that height. Like, I've still got absolutely tons of height here, and there's nothing wrong with that. And depending on your box and stuff, you might be able to do different levels, maybe because it's a lower box, and you could just do it where the sofa is, for example, and just gain some storage under there where you don't need to stand all the time and have full height in the kitchen. But it really utilises the space, because if you have overhead cupboards in a Luton, well, I certainly wouldn't be able to reach them if I was 30 centimetres lower, so it would be more of a faff, and then you'd have weight up high, which isn't great, as I've previously said. So before I blabber on, I'll end this video here. So if it did help you out, please let me know in the comments. If you've got any questions, also let me know in the comments. I'd love to answer all your questions, and any video suggestions, pop them down there as well. And make sure you do like this video so it gets recommended to other people. If you're not subscribed, make sure you do, because there'll be more Luton conversion videos coming out soon. And hit that bell icon, and I'll see you next week.